The minority mindset has nothing to do with the way you look, your ethnicity, or skin color. It's the mindset of thinking differently than the majority of people. The majority of people is broke, miserable, unhappy, and not fulfilled. So if that's not what you want to do, you can't keep doing what everybody else does.
I'm talking about the one and only Jaspreet Singh, who's a serial entrepreneur and licensed attorney. He's on a mission to make financial education fun and accessible.
While money might not be able to buy happiness after a certain point, the lack of money can really take away your happiness. The reality is money talks. And in this economic system, if you don't have money, you are going to be at the mercy of people who have money.
When Jaspreet Singh was in law school, I don't think he could have imagined that he'd end up having a YouTube channel that would help millions of people with their finances. But that's exactly what Jaspreet has done. In today's podcast, we get Jaspreet's thoughts on the biggest mistakes you're making with your money, how people really become rich, and how he grew his YouTube channel and various businesses to over 7 figures. I'm Erika Kullberg, this is Erika Taught Me, and today we're here with Jaspreet Singh. So I first want to ask, what would you say are the 3 biggest money mistakes people are making?
The first mistake that I think people are making is they follow the 2 S's. You're saving and spending all of your money. The second mistake is you don't understand how the system works. And the third mistake is you don't know how to put your money to work. So if we start by diving into number 1, you're saving and spending all of your money. The first one, if you make $1,000, most of us think in what I call net zero terms, meaning you make money and now you think, how do I spend it? And I realized this because I used to teach or guest teach in Detroit public schools. Detroit is a rough school district. And in this school, many of the kids, or actually pretty much every kid in my classroom, worked a job. And I asked them, how many of you now have a bank account? Not a single one raised their hand. So I asked, what do you do with the money that you make? And the consensus was you get a paycheck, a physical paycheck, you go to the liquor store, you pay 1 to 10% of your check in fees. And then on the way out, you buy a bunch of pop, candy, soda, a bunch of junk. And now by the time you leave the store, half of your paycheck is gone. So if you think in terms of spending, well, now you have no money to build wealth. This happens across all income levels. If you think of what would you do if you had 10 grand? Most people think of, I would go on a nice trip to Bali, or I'd go to Cancun, or I'd go to this nice vacation. If you had 50 grand, I'm going to buy a nice Benz or a Beamer. If I had 500 grand, I'm going to go out and buy this nice mansion. We think in terms of spending as opposed to now what wealthy people do, which is in terms of investing. How do I build my wealth? So if you're spending all your money, you have no margin to actually build wealth. The second one isn't as easy to understand, which is now saving. Because growing up, I grew up in a traditional Indian house. My parents are immigrants from a state in India called Punjab. And the traditional Indian culture is a save-heavy culture. I joke that American people spend $1 to make $2. Indian people make $1 to spend 20 cents because, they're cheap, okay? But it's a save-heavy culture. And it has its benefits, but the reality is you're never going to become wealthy by saving your money. Because if you look at it from just a financial perspective, if you get a 1% interest rate at your bank and inflation is higher than 1%, that means your savings are losing value to inflation every single day. So you're slowly becoming poorer by saving your money. And this is where now you have to understand the value of saving and when do you save, because it's not that wealthy people don't save money, it's that they know how to save their money the right way. And so now if you think about that, how do you save your money the right way? Well, there's 3 reasons why you should be saving your money. You should save your money for an emergency. You should save your money for an investment. And you should save your money for a big purchase. You need money for an emergency in case you lose your job, in case somebody gets sick, somebody gets hurt. You want to have savings for that. You want savings for an investment because now if you want to go out and buy a rental property, you want to buy a business, you want to do whatever, it costs money to do that. And you want to have cash for that. And if you want to buy a house or a car or anything, you need cash. So you want to have money for buying something. But if you're just saving your money to save it, now you're losing the value of your money. And so this is where now you need to break away from first the spending culture, because we live in a spending culture. We're in a consumerism culture where everybody wants the nice stuff, even if you can't afford it. That's why the buy now, pay later industry has been booming over the last few years. But then you have to think a little bit deeper and know that, okay, I'm not spending all my money, so now I'm just saving it. But that's not the right thing either, which then brings us to the second part, which I talked about, which is now understanding how the system works. And the best way I can explain this is to just give my own personal story, because this is something that I went through. Like, my parents are immigrants and they came here to America with very little. My dad came to this country with less than $100, didn't know the language, didn't know the people, didn't know the culture, had to work very hard. And growing up, I didn't get to spend a lot of time with my parents because they were always working. My grandparents also lived with me and my parents. So my parents moved here and then my grandparents moved in with us. So my grandparents essentially raised me. And I would see how hard my parents worked. And they would always say, don't worry about money. Don't stress about money because it's bad, it's evil, it's taboo. But at the same time, they're always working to get a paycheck. Now, we weren't poor. Like, I never had to worry about where my next meal was going to come from, but I saw how hard they had to work. And then they would say, don't worry about money, but go and become a doctor. Now I'm like, why do you want me to become a doctor? So you become successful. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you're a doctor, you're a doctor. You got the DR in front of your name, so people are going to reference you as a doctor. Like, well, I don't really care about that. Well, if you're a doctor, then you're going to find somebody who's going to want to marry you. Like, okay. If you're a doctor, you're also going to be financially free. Oh, so you mean that I should become a doctor because you make good money? And now, the reality is people do work to get paid. Now, you should love what you do, but the money does matter, because if the money didn't matter, then you wouldn't ask for a paycheck. You know, I mean, if you don't believe me, go tell your boss not to pay you and see how long you stay at that company, right? But the money does matter. You should do what you love. But the reality is there's a lot of people that do things solely for the money. And I was kind of going down that route. Like, I like the idea of helping people. Morally, I want to help people. I love the idea of helping people. But then financially, if I'm doing medicine to help people, if I want to optimize and maximize the money I make as a doctor, how do I do that? That means you got to see more patients. And if I'm trying to maximize the patients that I see, I'm not going to be able to provide the best value to each patient. So when I was in college, I'm thinking about this. Now my brain is like kind of having this internal conflict where, am I being a doctor to help people or am I being a doctor to make money? And that was one of the first catalysts for me to realize that, I don't want to do this. And now I'm studying for the MCAT, which is the test you take to get into medical school. And I'm searching on Google for, the richest people in America, just bored out of my mind, just trying to find something to like calm myself down as I'm studying. And I see people like Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg was there at the time, but a lot of these people who were not doctors didn't follow the traditional system. And that's when I started to question things a little bit more. And I started reading business books. And that's when I started to realize that wealthy people aren't working to climb the corporate ladder and get a good job. They're working to own the corporate ladder. And this was a whole new realization for me, because this was something that I never grew up learning, because most of us who are told to go and become successful, we're told to go to school, get good grades, get a good job, and then work to climb that corporate ladder. But if you look at the successfulest people in the world, I don't even know if successfulest is a word. You don't have to know all the right words. But if you look at the most successful people in the world, none of them did that. They're working to do something different. Now, this had me questioning, why are we never taught this? Because I went through a lot of schooling. I mean, I went through law school just like you did. You're a much smarter attorney than I am. No. But I went through a lot of schooling and I never once learned a thing about how to become wealthy. Because when you go to school, you're told to get good grades so you can get a good job. And you're told to work for a salary. But wealthy people don't work for a salary. They're working for equity, which is something completely different than your salary. Because in America, now you can hate this or love it, but this is the reality of the system, which is why you want to understand the system. We live in something called a capitalist system. And what that means is there are two ways that you can earn money. You can earn money from your labor, or you can earn money from your capital. Now, the way you earn money from your labor is you go to work and you get paid. You get paid a salary, you get paid hourly, it doesn't matter. You're getting paid for the work that you put in. Your capital now is your money. You're getting paid through putting your money to work. And this kind of ties into the third thing that I talked about, is knowing how to put your money to work. But this is where you have to think differently than what we're all taught, because the way the system works is you're benefited more when you earn money from your capital than if you just earn money from your labor. And the reason why is now you can get paid not based off of how many hours you put in, but based off of the profits that a business is generating. And now you don't have to physically be the one that's working at a job. You could be the one that owns a piece of the business. And now as the business produces money, you get your piece of that. And the question is now, how do you do it? Because most of the times we assume, oh man, that's a lot of money. Like, how am I gonna go out and buy a company and start getting this sort of equity, getting this capital and investing it? Well, there's two ways that you can earn money through your capital. One way is by buying it. The second way is by building it. And the easiest example that I can give you of building it is, think of just building a home. You buy the materials, you got to have the cash for that. But now you're literally going to build a home. If you build a home and you built it yourself, well, you're going to get it a lot cheaper and you have natural equity in your home. It's the same thing with the business. If you can build a business, well, now you're building the equity, the value of your business, and now this is something that you own. Compare that to now buying it, where now you can buy ownership in companies, stocks. You can buy ownership in real estate investments. You can buy ownership in cryptocurrency. You can buy ownership in startups. There are so many things that you can buy ownership in, but it requires you to now think a little bit different, because the first thing is you need some margin. You can't save all your money and not want to invest it. You can't spend all of your money because now you have no money to invest. Now you need this margin, and then you need to know how to break away from the traditional system, because now you have to put this money to work, meaning you need to invest it to go out and buy this equity. Now, the great thing is you don't need a ton of money to do this. Like, there are so many apps out there that will let you start investing your money with under $1,000. There's a lot of apps out there that will let you start investing with under $100. There are even apps out there that will let you start investing with $1. So if you have $1, you can go out and start investing in this type of equity. And if you slowly keep doing this, you will be able to compound your way to wealth. I talked on my YouTube channel, Minority Mindset, about a guy named Earl Crawley. And he worked minimum wage. He was a parking lot attendant, never really earned much money. But he started by putting aside $25. And I think it was $25 a month. And that $25 a month slowly compounded to $25,000. And he did that by investing his money into low-cost ETFs. And then he said, I'm going to take this to the next level. I'm not going to be able to invest a whole lot more money, but I want to take charge of my own investments. So then he started investing in individual companies. He started learning. He started doing it himself. And then he was able to slowly compound his $25 a month investments. Maybe he did a little bit more later on, but he worked as a parking lot attendant. And he built this up to a $500,000 investment portfolio with small incremental investments. So the key is now not starting with $100,000 or $1,000. The key is being consistent and automatically and passively investing your money, no matter how much money you start with, but putting your money to work. But this requires you to now not just save and spend all of your money. It requires you to now understand how the system works. Then it requires you to know how to invest your money. And this is where, some people are going to say you have to invest your money in real estate. Others are going to say you have to go into crypto. It doesn't matter. This is where financial education comes in handy, because now you can start to do this research for yourself and decide, maybe I want to invest some in stocks, some in real estate, some in physical gold. Like, I invest my money in 5 places. And so it's a way for me to now get diversification across different asset classes. There are many different ways for you to invest, but this is where you need that financial education to now know what to do and how to do it.
Wow. That was so good.
Thank you,
Erika. I was blown away by yeah. I liked what you said about how a lot of this seems unattainable. I mean, I know when I was growing up, I thought investing was something only the rich people did. Yeah. But like you said, you can start with $1. You can start with $10. What are some other things that you think people think, oh, it's only something the rich do, but they can actually be doing every day in their lives?
So it's funny. So I grew up with my grandparents, and about 15 years ago, they moved back to Punjab, India. And about a month ago, they moved back to America, actually to New York, which is one of the reasons why I'm here. And I was spending time with my grandfather last night, and I talked to him. We talk about a bunch of things, and, he doesn't really understand fully what I do, but he knows that I talk about money and education, which he's very impressed by because he grew up through a very different level of poverty that is hard to explain. And the reason why is because he was a refugee. Both of my grandparents were born on the west side of Punjab. So in 1947, my home state of Punjab was severed by the Indian government. And if you were a Sikh, which is the religion that I am, and you lived on the west side, you had to migrate east, otherwise you were going to be killed. And he was on the west side. And so he literally lost everything he had. Lost his home, his land, he lost his friends, he left his family, he left his everything that he had. All he had were the clothes on his back and a sword in his hand. And that was it. And coming across, he, like many others, got attacked by a mob. And so he had to literally fight for his life. And he saw his uncle get killed right in front of him during that attack, but then made it to the east side. And along the way, he lost his shoes. And he describes it in a really funny way, but he was like, it was just so hard and tiring. I just somehow lost my shoes along the way and then made it to the east side of India, had no shoes, no place to sleep, no home, no food to eat, nothing. And what he says is during that time, the level of poorness that I faced, there was no concept of trying to feed somebody else. My only focus was being able to take care of myself. And so one of the biggest diseases that he says is that level of poverty, poorness, because when you're that level of poorness, poverty, you can't help others. The only thing you want to do is take care of yourself. And so yesterday I was asking him, I was like, when you were growing up, was there ever a concept of investing? He said, yeah. And I said, was it available for regular people? He said, no, investing was for people who were rich. Regular people didn't even know what the concept of investing was. And I asked him, did you ever invest your money? And he said, yeah, as it started to get settled, they told me that I could buy these things called shares. And I bought some of them, and I don't know what happened to them. He bought the shares, and he has no idea if they made money, lost money. It was money he put into quote unquote shares, never saw that money again. And so you talk about, is there anything now that people think that wealthy people can do, or only wealthy people can do, but regular people cannot? Yes, because that time is different. Where our parents' time, our grandparents' time, where investing in money was reserved for only a certain class of people, we don't live in that generation. If you have the ability and means to watch this and understand what we're saying, you're very blessed, and you have all the tools that you need, because now either you have access to a phone or a computer, which means you can download some apps on your phone. And so now if you want to invest in the stock market, there's so many apps out there. You can watch some of the videos on my channel. I know you've talked about some before too. There's so many. If you want to invest in real estate, but you don't have the means or want to go out and invest in rental properties because you don't want to deal with tenants, because that can be a big pain in and of itself, well, there's crowdfunding apps that make investing in real estate so much more accessible. If you want to invest in startups, you watch Shark Tank and you're like, oh, I want to invest in startups too. Well, there's crowdfunding sites that will allow you to invest in startups, little startups that are looking for cash. And now you can invest in these startups where I think the minimum is $100, but very small amounts of money. It's highly risky. Many of these companies will go bankrupt, but you have the potential to now see huge returns, because if one of the companies you invest in goes public or gets acquired, you can see a massive return on your money. But again, high risk. You can invest in gold passively. I invest in physical gold. I do it completely passively, where every month some of the money leaves my checking account and is automatically buying me physical gold. So there's really no excuse anymore, where accessibility is not a reason for why we cannot invest, because the dollar amount is so low where if you have $1, you can start investing your money. And now if you have access to technology to listen to what we're saying, you can go out and start investing your money. The last factor now that's missing is the education side, because when you're in a growing market, everybody is a financial genius because now you can put your money into anything you want and you're going to make money and everyone's going to look at you like, oh, you're a financial genius. Just go onto Reddit and start posting about your stock gains and people are going to be very excited. But now when you start to go through slowing economic cycles and downward stock market cycles, this is where now you start to see who is a real investor and who is a not so real investor, because real wealth, I'm talking about real wealth, is built in silence, while that short-term wealth, the flashiness, that richness is very loud. And people like to be loud and flashy, but that's not how the real wealth is built. Now, the nice thing though, and this is one of the biggest blessings ever, is that this financial education is now so much more accessible than ever, thanks to YouTube, for decentralizing education, because I was never exposed to this type of education. Like, my parents are not investors. When I wanted to invest in real estate, I had read a few books about investing in real estate, and I'm a horrible reader. Like, English is my second language. I'm not the best reader. I'm very slow at it, but I started reading books because I was so interested by it, and I started listening to these audio CDs. That was how I learned. And then I went out and I just did it, and I made a ton of mistakes. But now, if you want to learn how to invest in real estate, you just go onto YouTube, search real estate investing, and you can see real estate investors walking through their deals. Like on my channel, I walked through my worst real estate deal ever, talked about every single mistake that I made. It was the most painful deal that I've ever done, and it's the only deal to date that I've ever lost money on. And you can watch it for free. And so the accessibility factor of learning is so much easier, because before, if you wanted to learn how to invest in real estate, you'd have to, at the very least, go out and buy a $25 book. So it means you got to go to the bookstore, buy a book, and then you got to read it, which is tough. I mean, it takes time and it takes a lot of dedication, as opposed to going to YouTube and watching a 25-minute video, which can teach you a big chunk of what you're going to learn in the book. Now, of course, there's value for books, there's value for classes, there's value for videos, there's different levels of type of education that you can get. But that level of education is so much more accessible now, where, you say, what do people think is only reserved for wealthy people? Well, there's a lot of things that people think are reserved for wealthy people. But now, because of the education, everything is so much more accessible, where if you have the drive, you have the mindset, all the tools are on your fingertips, and now it just requires you to go out and take the action and believe it's possible for you. The reason why I call myself the minority mindset is because I say all success starts with your mindset. If you don't believe you can do it, I 100% guarantee that you're not going to be able to do it. I mean, there's just no other way. But if you believe you can do it, if you have the right mindset, and then you're willing to put in the work to learn, and you're willing to make mistakes, you're willing to take a risk, nothing can stop you. It might take some time. Like, it took me a solid decade to figure out how to do it, to build a business, to invest my money the right way, to really build wealth. It took me a solid decade, which sounds like a lot because we all want to become rich tomorrow. But if you're willing to put in the work, nothing can stop you. And this is where, understanding that the real long-term game is a long-term game. The real wealth is built in silence, and you just keep learning, putting in work. And then if you look back 6 months, you'll be surprised by how far you come. And then you look back 2 years and you can't even recognize how far you come. And then you look back 5 years and it's a completely different life. But it requires that first step, and you not comparing yourself to somebody at the finish line. Just look at where you are and see where you want to be, and just keep making small steps forward, because the accessibility factor is there. Where we have never been able to access this level of research, education, and tools to do the things that can make regular people wealthy, but now it requires regular people to go out and actually do it.
Yeah. You spoke about the minority mindset, which, by the way, since I first discovered you years ago, I've always loved that and the meaning behind it. What is the majority mindset?
So the minority mindset, we'll start with there and I'll explain the majority, because the minority mindset has nothing to do with the way you look, your ethnicity, or skin color. It's the mindset of thinking differently than the majority of people. So what is the majority mindset? Well, the majority mindset is what most people are doing. And the way I like to say it is, if you're doing what everybody else is doing, 80 to 90% of the time, you're doing something wrong. You could be more efficient, doing something better, doing something more fulfilling, doing something that makes you more happy if you do something a little bit different. Because most of the times We build a box around ourselves. We create these invisible boxes around ourselves and our minds where we think this is how life is supposed to be. You're supposed to go to school and get a good job. You're supposed to then put aside 10% of your income for your savings. You're supposed to be miserable because everybody complains about their job. You're not supposed to travel that much because who travels for 6 months out of the year? You're not supposed to be able to do this and have this nice car because that's only for certain types of people. We give ourselves these invisible scripts, these invisible scenarios where we tell ourselves, this is how life is supposed to be because that's how it's always been done and this is what everybody else does. But if you keep doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to end up just like everybody else, which the majority of people is broke, miserable, unhappy, and not fulfilled. So if that's not what you want to do, you can't keep doing what everybody else does. And it sounds mean. Like, Jaspreet, why would you say that? The majority of people are broke and miserable. Look, statistics. There was a new study that came out, I think it was yesterday, that 61% of Americans are now living paycheck to paycheck. And now there's always varying statistics where sometimes it's 61%, sometimes it's 69%, sometimes it's 72%. But we know the majority of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. We also know that the majority of Americans have less than $1,000 saved up for an emergency. So more than 50% of Americans have less than $1,000 saved up. 50% of Americans have zero investments at all. That means no IRA, no 401k, no stock market investment, no real estate investments, no gold investments, nothing. Half of Americans have no investments. We also know that half of America is not happy at their jobs. Actually, more than half of America. I think it's about 3/4 of Americans are not happy at their job. This might be a pre-pandemic number, but I would bet that even today, the vast majority of Americans are not happy at their job. We also know that the vast majority of Americans are not happy with their lives. So now if you look at the statistics, the majority of people are not happy in many different aspects of their lives, yet you want to keep doing what everybody else does just because that's the system. This is where it's like, come on. Think about that for a second. If you don't want to be like everybody else, you can't keep doing what everybody else does. But the issue that I have with the traditional school system is that many of us are told what to think as opposed to being told how to think. And the reason why this is so important nowadays is because education has become so much more accessible thanks to YouTube and podcasts. And so if education is more accessible, now we can learn whatever we want. Many times we don't know how to think and we don't know how to learn because social media, we've heard of these rabbit holes. There's documentaries on this where if you watch anything on social media, whether it's finance, whether it's your diet, you start to go down a rabbit hole where social media is going to show you more and more and more of the same thing. And this is good if you're learning something good and healthy, but it can also be bad if you're learning something that's not good, because now you start to think that anybody who thinks differently than you is wrong, stupid, and dumb. And you start to get immersed into this whole lifestyle of thinking that this is the only way to think. But that's not how you learn, because true intellect is being able to understand both sides and then find where along the spectrum you lie. And so this requires you to now learn. So what does that mean? You learn things that make you feel uncomfortable.
When you look back at your childhood and your formative years and your young adult life, what do you look and say, wow, these were defining moments that really formed my mindset on money and my values around money?
So when it comes to money particularly, I think there's two different aspects. One is the earning side and one is more kind of like now the investing side. Because growing up, I always wanted to help my parents. I love my parents to death. They are huge supporters of me now, but I always wanted to help them. And so when I was a kid, I wanted to earn money. So the first thing I did, I was probably 10 years old. I started mowing my neighbor's lawns. And my parents stopped me. They said, don't do that. Focus on studying so you can become a doctor one day. So I was like, okay, kind of starts building this question of, are we working for money? Why are we working for money? When did we work for money? And then I became a paper boy. I earned 7 cents a house. So I would deliver 100 papers every Wednesday and earn $7. And I was discouraged from doing that, but I did it anyways because I knew this is what I wanted to do. And then as I started to get a little bit older, the things started to get a little bit more serious on the earning side, where I started to play this drum, Indian drum called a tol at weddings, Indian weddings. And my parents were really not for that. They wanted me to focus on my studies and stop doing these like other fun, whatever hobbies that I was doing. But that really was a major turning point for me, because when I started playing this drum, I got to meet a lot of local Indian DJs. And all of us were like this kind of like little group of hustlers trying to figure it out. And we had the idea to start hosting teen parties for kids in my high school. So now I was 16 years old. We made a deal with a local Indian restaurant that was looking for exposure. And we said that we would start hosting teen parties here. I'd promote it to my friends in my high school. My DJs didn't charge me to perform there. And now we started a little side hustle where now we're hosting teen parties and making a little bit of money. And I thought it was a hobby because I was like, what am I going to do with this? I know I got to become a doctor. This is just for fun. So it ends because now I got to go to college. I go to college and I don't know what to expect because my parents didn't go to university here. I think everybody goes to college to study hard and become this, professional in college. And I get there and I don't know what to bring. I brought like 5 things with me. I know it was a microwave. It was a sleeping bag. It was like my backpack and 2 other small things. I didn't have a towel. I just kind of dried off like this. And I didn't even have a blanket. I literally slept in a sleeping bag for the first however long when I was in college because I didn't know what to bring. And I get there and everybody around me is partying, drinking, blowing money that they don't have. And I was mind blown. I was like, where do you all get this money? And why are you spending it all on alcohol? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. And I don't drink. I never drink. I don't smoke. I never smoked. It just wasn't my scene. But I still needed something to do on Friday nights. So instead of now going to the parties, I was like, well, why don't I bring this teen party idea back into college? And so that's what I did. I started knocking on the doors of a bunch of clubs, venues, restaurant, bars on campus. And some of these restaurant owners, bar owners, club owners would say, yeah, you need 10 grand to host a party here. I was like, well, I don't got 10 grand. And you keep going, right? You learn to kind of talk to people. And eventually I found this club that said, yeah, you can do a party here. We're not going to charge you a penny. Just give us half of the cover charge, half of the revenue that you bring in. I said, okay, that works. Now we're in business. And that's how I started now, my college event planning company. And that gave me some cash now in my bank account because we grew pretty big. It took some time to get there. But eventually I was contracted by one of the biggest clubs on campus. This is in Ann Arbor. I went to the University of Michigan to host their college night every week. And on top of that, I would also host my own monthly events. And I was also hosting concerts. I was hosting some shows and official after parties. Like we grew pretty big in the 4 years that I was in college. And I started making some money. And that money now was sitting in my bank account. I started reading business books. And I'm studying for the MCAT. And that's when also real estate prices happened to be at rock bottom after the 2008 crash. And I started investing in real estate when I was in college. I was 19 years old. I took my MCAT on August 22nd. And on August 23rd, I closed on my first rental property. Now, it was a very different time where it cost me $8,000. That was the full price of the condo because I was, we're in Michigan where the biggest economic drivers in our state were Ford, GM, and Chrysler. GM had just declared bankruptcy. Chrysler had just declared bankruptcy, and Ford was on the verge of bankruptcy. So the real estate market was exceptionally hit hard. I didn't really understand what was happening. I can look back and tell you what happened. But the condo that I purchased was sold for $150 grand a few years prior to me purchasing it. And then I came in and bought it for $8 grand out of foreclosure from the bank. And now this is my first experience with any sort of like real investing, real passive income. I was very fortunate, but it took a lot of effort for me to get there because I knew a lot of people on campus who had way more money than I did, but weren't doing what I was doing. Whether it's because, I was interested in this. I had that mindset. I was looking at things differently than the way they were, but it was just being able to capitalize on that opportunity.
And so then you went to law school.
Yeah. So I told my parents I didn't want to be a doctor and they didn't believe me. And then after a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, eventually we came to a compromise. My parents said that if you want to maintain any pride in the family, you have to at least become an attorney. I was like, okay. And I agreed to that because, well, one, it didn't seem like that big of a deal to me because I've always been in school. So I didn't mind school. I liked learning. But the best part about law school was that I knew you could do law school part-time, which meant I could work on my business and my investments and everything that I was doing full-time. So I was like, all right, let's do this. So I went to law school. I spent the first year and a half full-time while still working on my business full-time. So it was very tough. But then the second half, I did part-time and I was working on my business and everything else that I was doing. So it was a unique experience because I knew I wasn't there to become an attorney, but I also didn't know exactly what I was going to do. And so in law school, this is where now I didn't put much focus into my actual law classes. I liked learning. I especially liked the tax classes, the business classes, because it was just something that I could relate to. But I knew I wasn't there to become an attorney. Now it was stressful because, I said like I didn't know what I was going to do. So I would have a lot of nights where I couldn't sleep. I had a lot of anxiety because I didn't know what I was going to do. And I knew that if I couldn't figure it out, that I would graduate law school and look like a fool and have to start from scratch. And so there was a lot of nights where I just stayed up at night. And for me, it became a big motivator because now I was working all the nights that I couldn't sleep. So I'd work early morning, I'd work late at night. I mean, all I did was work and I spent as little money as possible. Like I was making good money. I was making 6 figures. But I was spending nothing. Like my rent was about $400 a month. It was under $400 a month. And that included all of my utilities. And the reason why is because I didn't even have a room. Like I slept on the living room floor. I would drag a mattress down into the living room in the evenings, put down the sheets, go to sleep, wake up, fold the sheets, put them on the sofa, and then pick up the mattress, put it in the living room, and go out and study and work all day, and then come back and just go to sleep. So, I mean, I created this environment where there was nothing else. Like, all I did was work and study. And every dollar that I had saved, I was putting back into me. Either I was investing it into something like real estate, or I was taking this money and investing it back into my business and my own education. So I was really putting every penny and every minute that I had back into myself because I knew I needed to do something and I was going to do whatever it took. Then I graduated law school and I was never worked a day as an attorney. And so it was kind of like for me, it was one of those things where I became an attorney. I gave my parents a degree, the degree that they wanted, but I never worked a day as an attorney. But it was just one of those things I did because that's what I thought I needed to do to become successful.
Do you feel like it was worth it? I mean, you spent all of these years going to law school. I'm sure tons of student loans, or you fronted the money up.
So I was very fortunate that I didn't have to take out any student loans because, for one, I had a huge scholarship. And the second part, I just paid with cash, whatever I had to pay for. So it wasn't that much out of pocket, and my rent was super cheap. So my cost was super low. But the time, if I didn't go to law school, I would have worked on my business even more. Maybe I would be a little bit further. But I met some really cool people. And now I get to say that I went to law school but never worked as an attorney. So I got to have that benefit.
It's so interesting, your story, because you were making so much from your business while you were a student, which is not the common path. So I'm curious, where did your first $1 million come from? How old were you and how did you make it?
I was in my 20s. And I mean, it's not like it just happens, but it's, for me, I was focused on my business. So I have Minority Mindset, which is my personal brand. Then I have Market Briefs, which is the main business that I run. And Market Briefs is a daily financial newsletter where we break down exactly what's happening in the top finance and business news into a fun, witty, easy to read email that even if you are not a financial person, like I never grew up learning about money, that you are going to enjoy reading this because I want to make financial education more accessible. So that's what we do with Market Briefs. And so it's like, how did I hit this first million? Well, there's many different ways to measure a million, right? You can measure it in terms of equity or dollars or whatever. Honestly, I never really counted it. I never used one of those like net worth measuring apps because to me that was all, I don't want to say stupid, but it didn't serve that much importance to me because net worth is a very fleeting indicator where let's just say your net worth is $1 million in the stock market. Well, tomorrow the stock market can crash and that could be worth $500,000. So to me, that doesn't really mean much. So what I was doing is really, I was just constantly, I had a system where I made money and I invested everything. Like I lived very small. I had very little expenses and I invested everything. I was buying real estate. I was buying stocks. I mean, it was just buying the investments that I talked about and investing the money back in my company. And, people assume that when you make $1 million in a year, we'll talk about that, $1 million in a year, not $1 million net worth. When you make $1 million in a year, you're going to be living large and this and that. Well, the first time I quote unquote made $1 million, I probably took home 20 grand because I made $1 million, but then I reinvested everything. And so what does that mean? I reinvested back into the company. I hired more employees. I improved our infrastructure. I invested in real estate. I mean, I was investing everything because, I made $1 million, but I have nothing to show for it, right? Like I don't have a flashy car. My employees had better cars and still do have better cars than I do. I wasn't living large. I was just working because for me, after a certain income amount, the money doesn't drive you and it doesn't become a big purpose. And that for me is a big thing where I'm not really driven by money. For me, it's the purpose. And so minority mindset, I do because I provide that financial education that I wish I had when I was getting started. Market briefs, I could take out big profit checks, but I don't because I'm trying to grow. We're trying to reinvest and serve this purpose where, of course, look, there's a financial motive. I don't want to get this like sidetracked. We are a for-profit company. We provide a free newsletter and it's free because we sell advertisements to our partners, but it's for profit. However, I see the bigger purpose, which is why we're reinvesting so aggressively and we're trying to do other things with it. So, for me, it's a little bit bigger than that. And, that's what really drives somebody where now if you have the purpose, now you can think a lot bigger. And what you'll see is a lot of the people that become really successful is they're driven way more by purpose than they are the dollars. Because after a certain point, dollars can't really drive you. Maybe they can for some people, but for me, it was never one of those things where like, oh, I need this nice car. Look, to this day, my car is worth $500. There's no bumper on this car. And I was in California for a little while. We were talking. And when I was in San Diego, I was living out there. I got a call from my HOA because my car was sitting in my driveway and there's no bumper on it. And it's kind of beat up. And they said that, hey, we've had a number of complaints about your house. And I was like, whoa, what happened? I thought that something like the house is on fire. I was like, what's going on? She's like, well, there's this black car, junk car sitting in your driveway that people keep complaining about. I'm like, excuse me? Yeah, there's this junk car. You shouldn't keep scrap cars at your house. Please put it in storage. I'm like, well, it's not a junk car. That's my car. That's the car that I drive to and from work every single day. And, now, I want to caveat this, where it's not that I don't like nice things. Like, I will buy a nice car. I don't have any issue with that. It's just, for me, that's not the most important thing. I know I will buy a nice car, but, if I take 150 grand and go buy a nice car, which I can do, I have a nice car. But if I take the 150 grand and reinvest it back into the company right now, well, now we have more employees. We have better infrastructure. I can do so much more. And so, the way I look at it is, well, I'd rather do this right now. And now, you might be listening saying, well, when is enough? I don't know. I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I don't need a nice car. Like, look, there are things that are important to me. We were talking about flying business. Okay. I like not sitting in economy class when I'm flying overseas. If I'm going to India to go visit family, I don't want to sit in economy and I will spend money. We talked about you're going to pay that much money cash. Yes, I will spend that much money cash to go visit my family in India because I find the comfort in paying for a business class ticket. I like traveling. Hey, I like having nice Airbnbs. That's important to me. I will spend money on that. So, it's finding what's important to you and being willing to spend on that, assuming you can afford it, but being willing to spend on the things that are important to you and not just blowing money for the purpose of showing it off because that's what's normal. People would assume, oh, if you make $1 million, you got to have this car. Do what's important to you when it's right for you. There's nothing wrong with having nice stuff. Make sure you can afford it, but understand, what are you working for, and just know the cost of anything. Like there's nothing wrong with having nice stuff. You want a nice car, you want to have nice stuff, you want to wear the designer stuff, great. Just make sure you can afford it. And if that's what you want, that's what you want. Like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. There's this study I read where they talked about how money over a certain threshold can make you happy. And they listed 3 ways. One was through buying experiences. The other was through pro-social giving, so giving your money away to charity or to your parents or something that makes you feel good about yourself. And then the third, and this is interesting because it ties into the business class flights, is just buying time back. And even the business class flights, what people don't realize is like it actually does buy you time back, because instead of being cramped up in your economy seat, you can possibly sleep during that night and then go to India the next day and have a very productive day, right?
100%. I mean, you're ready to go. You can sleep. You can work on the plane and get stuff done. I like that. And, when you talk about the giving aspect, that's also big for me, where, the more you have, the more you can do. And, giving is very important to me. Giving back to my family, but also the community. And again, it's what's important to you. But I do want to say that, this is where understanding money is so important, because while money might not be able to buy happiness after a certain point, the lack of money can really take away your happiness. Because if you don't have money and you're stressing about your bills, you can't buy your spouse the vacation that they want. You can't give your kids the education that they need. You can't buy the health care that you want to give your parents. You can't buy whatever. That's stressful.
Yeah.
And this is where understanding money is so important, because you want to have money. That way you can have and purchase the things you want, because the reality is money talks. And we can make it as many excuses as we want, but money talks. And in this economic system, if you don't have money, you are going to be at the mercy of people who have money, which is why you need to get money. But now, understand, money is just pieces of paper. It's just a tool. It's like gasoline. If you put gasoline on fire, it's just going to make the fire bigger. So if you give a good person money, now you have a tool to do more good. If you give a bad person money, you have a tool to do more bad, which is why we need more good people with money, which is why now financial education is so important. That way now you can go out, get money, do more good with it. And that's what we need more of.
We were talking earlier about the statistics around money and how most people don't have $1,000 saved. Most people have credit card debt. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck. If someone were to come to you living paycheck to paycheck in credit card debt and doesn't have $1,000 saved, what would be the roadmap you create for them to say, hey, we need to start here, then this?
The very first thing you got to do if you have credit card debt is you got to pay down the credit card debt as fast as possible, because your credit card company is charging you 15 to 25% a year in interest. And so the very first thing you got to do is you have to pay this down before you think about investing your money in the stock market, before you think about investing in real estate. You have to pay this down as fast as humanly possible. Once you do that, and along with that, to help you do that, the most accessible thing that you can do is cut your expenses. Now, this is not fun. And the most painful thing to do, however, it is the most necessary thing to do as you're on your journey to building wealth, because now it doesn't matter how much money you make. If you don't know how to manage your money, if you don't know how to spend your money, you are going to be broke. We talked about how 61% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. Well, the second part of the study said that I think it was like 50% of Americans or 51% of Americans making over $200,000 a year are also living paycheck to paycheck. The numbers might be a little bit off, but it's just about the majority of people making a couple $100,000 a year or more are also paycheck to paycheck. So it's not how much money you make, it's what you do with the money you make, which is why you have to first know how to control your expenses and spend less than what you earn. Once you can do that, the next part is now earning more money, increasing your income. This is way more fun, but it's way more beneficial once you know how to control your expenses, because now once you're earning more money, you don't want to start having this lifestyle inflation where, oh, I made an extra 10 grand, I got to go spend an extra 10 grand. Well, once you can control your expenses, you can earn more and start inflating a lifestyle marginally while increasing your income much larger. So you make more, you want your income to grow faster than your expenses. So it's kind of like this. You have a widening gap between your income and your expenses. So you can live bigger, but your income's also growing. So you have a bigger margin to invest, which will ultimately earn you more money, which means that you now make more money as well. So it becomes this positive cycle. But when you're not in that situation, it's a negative cycle where you're working very hard to earn your money, and every dollar you earn is constantly going out to pay your credit card company, to pay your bank back, to pay out your mortgage, to pay off your rent, to pay your car off. And so the first thing is you got to pay off the credit card. And then the second thing you got to do is you got to cut your expenses as much as you can. See what subscriptions you can cancel. See where you can find money. You have so many tools for that. So watch Erika stuff because she has a ton of stuff that you can do to cut your expenses. Then work on increasing your income. And the best example that I can give of this, I love examples as you can see, is if you make $40,000 a year and you tell yourself that you are going to save and invest a quarter of that, that means you're putting aside $10,000. Now, the next mistake that happens is people come in and they say, okay, you know what? I like this financial education thing. I want to save more. I want to invest more. So now you say, I'm going to put aside more than 10 grand. I'm going to try to do even more aggressive saving and investing. And that's fine, but there's a limited pie because there's a $40,000 pie. And then if you keep squeezing pennies, well, you're just going to keep squeezing yourself thinner. And a penny saved at the end of the day is just a penny. Versus now, let's think a little bit bigger. Where now, what if we, instead of just trying to squeeze more pennies out of this pie, we took it from 40 grand to 400 grand. And if you go from 40 to 400 grand and you put aside the same 25%, well, now you go from putting aside $10,000 to $100,000. It's a lot more money, but you haven't changed the percentage. Now, you might be hearing this thinking, Jaspreet, how in the world am I going to go from 40 to $400,000? Well, you're right. It is difficult and it might take some time. But the first thing, like I said before, is the mindset, believing you can do it. Because if you tell yourself you can't, you're never going to be able to do it. Once you believe you can do it, well, what's next? Maybe you'll watch some YouTube videos. Maybe you'll read some books. Maybe you'll get inspired and buy some classes. And then you start taking action. Some things will not work. You might lose money on some things. But then some things might. And you might find ways to create a new side hustle. Create a new business. You might find ways to earn more at your job. Maybe you get another certificate. Maybe you find ways now to amplify your income or create more income streams. And then you slowly start to build up your income. And this is where, again, right? It's not that 6-month plan. We're talking about a 10-year plan where a few years from now, you're going to look back and say, wow, I've really come a huge way. And then if you keep following this investing pattern that we talked about, where you keep putting money aside, well, now you have money that's actually working to build you wealth instead of just making everybody else around you richer. And this is where, that mindset, I keep saying this, but the mindset is so important. Because if you tell yourself that you need the Gucci, you need the Louis Vuitton, you need the Beamer, you need the Benz right now, and you're not willing to sacrifice that, it is going to be impossible. No matter how many hacks, tricks that you go through to build wealth, because you need that mindset shift. You become wealthy in your mindset before you become wealthy in your bank account. And you have to be willing to put in that work to become wealthy in your mindset first.
To me, there are two themes that people don't really grasp. And one is risk tolerance and the other is time horizon.
Yeah.
So everyone wants a get rich quick scheme that comes with no risk. They want money fast. They don't want to spend 80 years investing like Warren Buffett has, sure. Right? What do you say to that?
Well, let's talk about risk first, because that was the first thing you mentioned. Risk is one of those things where you have to have the appetite for risk, and there's no good way to develop it besides doing it. And for me, I'll talk about myself, and I try not to be too selfish, but I think sometimes personal stories help. I didn't understand the concept of risk when I was getting started. It was never something that crossed my mind of like, what if something went wrong? Because if I went back, I would no way do what I did. Because, for example, the event planning company, extremely risky. Not in a cash sense, but from a liability sense. Because guess what happens? People get intoxicated, they get drunk, they fight each other. And so here I am, 17 years old, hosting these parties where people are fighting each other at 2 a.m. And me, being this kid who played football in high school, I'll be the bouncer because I don't want people to get hurt at my parties. If someone gets hurt, I don't want my name on that lawsuit. I don't have insurance. I don't even know what insurance was. So, you have to be a little bit crazy and a little bit dumb. But then as you progress, like I'm not, again, you're the attorney, so let's put a little disclaimer here that, do your own research. But, as you start to grow, you start to know and learn how to manage your risk better. And you start to realize where's good risk, where's bad risk, and you can start to manage it. And because now, I'm not going to do the same things that I was doing when I was 15 or 17. I'm going to get insurance. I'm going to have good advisors. I can hire these people. And in the beginning, you might not be able to get it, but sometimes you got to hustle. And hustling is like just figuring it out. Sometimes you just got to figure it out. And then the second part regarding the time horizon is, you're right. it does take time. You hear stories all the time on social media. People like, oh, I went from 0 to 6 figures in 6 months. Okay, how? And it doesn't always work like that. Like, that is the exception, not the rule. And sometimes it can be overwhelming to see that. And this is where sometimes you got to cut out the noise. Like, what I did was I got off social media, meaning I have, my Instagram pages, but I did not touch my Instagram or any of my social media for about 2 years. I had my team manage all of my Instagrams, do everything, where I just wanted to get away, because you see like these 22-year-olds talking about all this stuff. And I was like, how are you making $1 million a year at 22 and I'm, 27 or 28, whatever. And I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, I was making good money. Like, don't get me wrong. I was making great money, but you start comparing yourself and doing this and that. And I was like, I don't got time for this. I just got to focus and keep working on me. And that's what I did. And so sometimes you just got to close your eyes and just remember that you're making progress, and stop comparing yourself to other people, and understand that life and wealth is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And most of the times the sprinters are the ones that, we talked about, that short-term richness is loud. Well, those are the sprinters, because those are also the first people to lose it all. And my theory on this has been proven many times over, where over the last 5 to 6 years, I've seen on social media a number of people rise and fall. People who show it all off and lose it all because they didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they made a little bit of money. Maybe they didn't make any money. They were just lying, because that is a big thing on social media. But you see the loud, flashy wealth fail, but the slow, silent, kind of that little bit of progress, those are the people that become insanely successful, because you're not trying to just show it all off. You're doing it for a bigger purpose.
100% agree. We have a closing tradition on the podcast. The podcast is called Erika Taught Me, but actually today is about Jaspreet Taught Me. So what do you want people to walk away from this podcast being able to say, Jaspreet taught me this?
Well, I'm going to do 2 things, if that's okay.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to do one that Erika taught me, because you had this little tip about AirPods, where if you go to the Apple store, they'll give you a free pair of AirPods if they're not working. And 2 days ago, I did that. I went to the Apple store on Manhattan. I got a brand new pair of AirPods. So Erika taught me that.
Good.
What did Jaspreet teach me? Well, the first thing is that you can do anything that you want. And one of the biggest things that hold people back from doing what it is, quote, that you want, is you're not going to be able to make enough money by doing that. Well, this is where now the financial education can allow you to do what it is that you want. I always liked the idea of being a teacher growing up, but being a teacher doesn't pay. Well, now I have the ability to be a teacher and make a great income, where it's, if you know the financial education, you can do whatever it is that you want, but you need, again, everything that we talked about. You need the right mindset, the right work ethic, then you need the right financial education to be able to put it in action. And knowing that no matter where you come from, no matter what you look like, it is possible for you if you're willing to put in the work.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erika. It was an honor to be on with you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, check out Jaspreet's YouTube channel called Minority Mindset. I'll put the link in the show notes. And I have a huge favor to ask. It would mean a lot if you could take a moment to leave a review for the podcast. Even just 1 sentence is perfect. It really helps support the work that we're doing. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me today, and I'll talk to you next Tuesday on a brand new episode of Erika Taught Me. See you then.